In this video, I would like to present to you software development workflow with automated testing included into the process. Our workflow starts with a draft status. Draft status is every story or any issue created in Jira which doesn't have a definition of done. It might be just a sketch of thoughts or a description of a user's story, and it definitely requires definition of done in order for the issue to move along the workflow process. This is why it has a transition called DoD finalize. So when we use the draft and finalize DoD as a product owner or during the meetings together with the team, we then click a transition called DoD finalized, and the story gets the status of DoD. So we know that all the stories with the DoD are stories which actually have DoD, and now they will require creating acceptance criteria for them to be tested and developed. So a person responsible for creating acceptance criteria, someone on a software development team, will have to click, will pick all the stories with the DoD status and work on them creating acceptance criteria. As soon as acceptance criteria are created for the story, we click the transition called AC to be approved, and the story moves on to acceptance criteria status. This way, product owner knows that everything in the acceptance criteria status is something they need to review and either approve or comment on acceptance criteria created for the story. As soon as the product owner is satisfied with all the acceptance criteria, they click on AC approved transition, and story now moves on to ready for development. And then and only then the story is ready for development process, and it can be committed to sprint, and development team can start working on it. If there are any comments or any kind of satisfaction with the acceptance criteria, the product owner chooses status which is called AC to be reworked, and the story goes back to DoD status. Now product owner has to add comments next to each acceptance criteria or inside of each acceptance criteria, tagging a person responsible for acceptance criteria and describing exactly what they need changed in the acceptance criteria for acceptance criteria to be approved by a product owner, or even set up a personal meeting where they can discuss all the questions and all the comments and finalize acceptance criteria together. So as soon as the story is in the ready for development status, a team can now start working on it, and as soon as a subtask or moves into progress, we click the implementation started, and we move the subtask and the story into in progress status. Now from this point we have different flows for a story and for a subtask. In our case, subtask is a technical assignment software team creates during tasking meetings. So as for the subtask, it doesn't have a human description, so a product owner cannot understand or validate it, and we validate such technical subtask by automated tests. So any subtask that passes automated test is considered to be approved. So for a subtask, when it's in progress, the next way to go for a subtask is to complete. Complete requires, when we use the complete transition, the status now becomes code review. In a code review status, someone is responsible for doing the code review on a subtask and running automated tests. If when code reviewer is satisfied with the code they see and the subtask passes all automated tests, the next transition to click is implementation finished, and the subtask moves on to done status. If there are any questions a code reviewer has during the code review, or some automated tasks failed, they click on failed code review status, and story now moves on to reopened. They click on failed code review transition, and story now moves on, subtask now moves on to reopen status. From the reopen, there is one way to go, which is back to in progress, and so we click the reworking begun transition, and subtask moves on back to in progress. And again, it goes to code review up until it passes all the automated tests and the code reviewer is satisfied with the code, and so the subtask becomes done. For this story moves on from in progress either straight to done if a product owner reviewed it and they're satisfied with it, or it can move on from the in progress straight to testing through the transition, which is called UAT required, user acceptance testing required. Some stories will require a user acceptance testing, so that's why we have in progress and to testing. And what we user acceptance test is the stories, not the subtasks. We make sure all the DoD are implemented, and we can approve as a UAT tester, we can approve the story, maybe even based on acceptance criteria scenarios. So if there are any bugs discovered during UAT, the story moves on to reopened and then back to in progress. And if everything is okay and it passes UAT testing, the story moves on to UAT passed. So eventually everything ends up in a done status. It's a development team who are responsible for subtasks to end up in a done status, and it's a product owner who is responsible for stories to end up in a done status. They still need to accept stories. So this is briefly the workflow, and here is how it works if we go to a backlog and watch how it's done. This is the two stories I created in a backlog. Click on one of them and you see it has a draft status. So the interesting part is when you open this story in a full view, then it presents you transitions which help you work and understand the workflow. You see it shows us here transitions instead of statuses, which is very cool because they're human and they're easily to understand and what you need to do next. So if I create my story description, I will just use dummy story description, and then I create my DoD here, 1, 2, 3. This is a story ready for user acceptance testing, and so I click, I first save description of my story, and I click here my transition, DoD finalized, because I have just finalized them. And now my story has moved on to the DoD status, as you can see here, and I see here another transition which is called AC to be approved. So now as a person responsible for acceptance criteria, my transition available is AC to be approved. This is my task to the product owner, and this is my status. So I look for all the stories with the DoD status, and I create acceptance criteria. They won't look like this, they will be a part of a story at the bottom, but I'm just doing stuff to explain the workflow. So this is my acceptance criteria, and they're now created. So what I need them to be approved. So I click what needs to be done, AC to be approved. AC to be approved, and now the story gets the acceptance criteria status. And from acceptance criteria, there are two transitions, either AC approved or AC to be rewarded. So as soon as the product owner opens the story with acceptance criteria status, they can either click on AC approved or AC to be rewarded status. Let's say I approve these acceptance criteria, I like them, this is what I click, and that's it. And now my story is ready for development. All the ready for development stories can now be committed into a sprint, and the team can start working on them. So they will show up on a board. Let's see if I have set up the board properly. I haven't started my sprint. Yeah, so I will move this one to the sprint because it has the correct status. Okay, let's say I started my sprint now. Yes, started my sprint. And in to do, I see all the ready for development stories. As soon as I'm done with, as soon as I start working with this one, I just drag and drop it into progress, and so on and so forth. So if I open again my story in details, I will be seeing transitions, and it will be easier for me to read it. I don't need any additional explanations, or I can just drag and drop them through the workflow, which works too. So right now I'm working on my story. I have a story, so it has three transitions here at the top: complete, user story accepted, or UAT required. So if I'm a product owner and I just view this story and okay, it looks fine to me, I click user story accepted. So it's accepted now, and it moves on to the done status, and we're done. If I wouldn't wanted to do some UAT, I would have clicked UAT required, and then it would have go to testing, and only then from testing to done. So that's the workflow, and please leave your comments, any suggestions.